Hey guys, welcome back. This is Library of Orthonc, LOTR TCG YouTube channel, back with another video for you. This is still in our classic series of the Worlds 2004. This is the movie block meta, of course, so kind of the final before they did the soft reset of the game, so just great synergistic decks. So we're looking at another top 8 deck. This was actually the 8th place. And unique among the top 16, I would say that none of the sides are playing exactly this kind of configuration, but it is a very strong deck type. So I'm going to walk you through that here. So the deck we are looking at today is Elven Archery with Morcs. So let's get right into that. So first off, the Free People's side is the Elven Archery. And love this starting fellowship. So we do have Frodo, Old Bilbo's heir, and as you guys know, these decks are all fully foiled out, so it's just, in my opinion, fun to just look at these cards because the foiling on them is so beautiful. So we've got Old Bilbo's heir, and we're actually featuring the Grass Ring in this deck. So Frodo with the Grass Ring. I'm assuming that's because we're willing to get Frodo into some skirmishes, and then if he's a base power 5, it's much easier to actually allow him to get into some skirmishes. So Frodo, Old Bilbo's heir with the Grass Ring, or I should say, such a weight to carry. So we've got that. That's the Ringbearer. Then for our starting fellowship, you probably saw we do have Legolas Greenleaf, absolute staple of the movie block format. You guys all know what he does. Then we have Arwen, Queen of Elves and Men. So this one's a little less common, but what this does is each minion skirmishing Arwen is strength -2 for each wounded minion you can spot. So that ends up making her pretty beastly because it just goes -2, -2, -2, depending on how many, really based on how many minions there are, because people tend to spread their archery wounds out among their minions rather than concentrating them on a single minion typically. And if they do concentrate on a single minion, that's where you can snipe it with Legolas. So that's kind of or I should say that's a little bit backwards because Legolas actually has to happen before the archery wounds are placed, so excuse me on that one. But there are other ways we can deal with substantially wounded minions. So next final companion in the fellowship should be no surprise, being that this is an Elven deck and this is the movie block. We have Galadriel, Lady Redeemed. Of course, she's free in the starting fellowship, and she's there to deal with all kinds of condition, possession, removal that we may need. So very nice starting fellowship with basically Frodo plus 3 elves. And you'll see what we're gonna kind of do with these elves now. So moving on into our additional companions. Don't have too many additional companions here, so we're not doing the traditional where you might usually play 9 companions. I think we only have, what do we have here? 7 companions, it looks like. So we have 3 additional, and that is very staple elf, and that is Círdan the Shipwright. As you guys know, there's just huge synergy between Galadriel and Círdan because Galadriel places events in the discard pile, and then Círdan uses those to pump himself. So we do have 2 copies of Círdan, so he's obviously a priority companion to get down. And then we do have 1 copy of Eowyn, Lady of Ithilien. This is just a splash companion, but just so busted in an archery deck because when she comes down, if they are concentrating wounds on a single minion, you assign that minion to Eowyn, and then opponent must wound a minion for each wound on each minion skirmishing Eowyn. So if she's, fighting a minion with 2 wounds on it, you exert her, and then your opponent has to take 2 wounds. And so how you time that out is very critical, but you can get into other skirmishes and then resolve Eowyn and really remove some minions from the table. So very strong card if you guys probably know this. Sometimes these archery decks, I will say, instead of going the route with Arwen, they actually feature Eowyn in the starting fellowship. Then you probably want to get her with Brago to do some exertions. But because she's a splash companion, we don't really have any support for her. She's more of a support card herself. And then lastly, again, no surprise, we're in the movie block. This is Sam, Son of Hamfast, just to remove burdens and act as a speed bump for that. So Sam, Son of Hamfast. So that is our companions. And again, you're typically not too worried about being swarmed and having to go up to a really large fellowship. When you're archery, you have built-in protection against swarm just because you are an archery deck. And then that means playing the 9 companions is not as critical. Now we do have a couple allies here next. So we have Elrond, the Herald to Gil-galad. Very, very good card in the movie block also. Kind of expensive, so be careful when you drop that down. But the synergy here, of course, always tends to be Legolas plus Elrond, and you can just keep reusing your Legolas over and over, healing him with Elrond. So that's the pretty obvious thing to do there. And then another, should be obvious synergy, but one that sometimes I think is underutilized, is the Bounder Old Bilbo's Heir combo. Like I said, we have Frodo with the Such a Weight to Carry, which gives him a 5 base. And then if we combine him with a Bounder, that kit gets healed every turn off of Frodo's Heal a Hobbit Ally ability. Basically, Frodo more or less permanently says cannot be overwhelmed unless his strength is tripled. So more or less then, Frodo can skirmish any minions of 14 or less, and you don't have to worry about it because of Bounder and Such a Weight to Carry. So that is a great combo to have, is the Frodo that heals the Hobbit allies. Then moving on to our artifacts and possessions. Nothing too surprising here, but got a nice suite of these. First off is Eyeglass for Legolas. Again, it's always key to remember that this, even though this is, Gil-galad's personal weapon, it works, of course, very well on Legolas Greenleaf. So we do have that. And much safer, of course, than the Tail of Gil-galad, because the Tail of Gil-galad can get hit by condition removal, whereas Eyeglass is safe from that, being that it's an artifact. And then, don't forget that you do have this regroup ability if you ever need it. Depending on if Legolas has sufficient vitality, you can throw this to wound a minion for each elf you can spot. So that's like probably 3 or 4. So that can really help you double move if you need to clear some minions off. Then this is, like I said, nice and unique in this deck among the movie block, is we are playing a suite to support Arwen. Gwemagol is a fantastic Arwen support card. Mostly because it is just a good weapon with damage +1 and 2 higher power, but also never underestimate the cycling ability, where if your hand is getting clogged, you can just use this to get rid of cards. So that's kind of a classic classic fellowship block card you don't see utilized too much in movie block, but does combo very well, of course, with the Queen of Elves and Men, as well as you have our Asfaloth, however you say that. Again, was decent in fellowship, but ran into the problem of you always run into site 5 and have to discard yourself when you go underground. The nice thing with the king block is you're not typically going underground, so you're typically just keeping Asfaloth with you the entire pathway. So then you're a base 10, and you can basically get reduced strength for the number of wounded minions. So this can be a very formidable fighter. Arwen with, the fully loaded weapon support package. Now, and I shouldn't say fully loaded, because the one other thing we're going to load her with is the next item, which is the Elven Bow. So how awesome is that if you see Arwen riding a horse with a bow with a hand weapon, Gwemagol? That is legit to be able to hold all of that. So that's what you could see on an Arwen. Now, of course, the Elven Bow, obviously Galadriel is a very obvious target for this, because she's in your starting fellowship, and, make her an archer as well. And then Círdan, again, would be the third person you'd be looking to put this on. So we do have 3 Elven Bows for those 3 companions. Again, just a fantastic card that just ups your archery total and cycles you well. And lastly, for possessions, we have Sting, Bane of the Eight Legs. Similar synergy I was already talking about how Frodo can just skirmish so highly. Just gets even more so when you get a Sting on him. That puts him up to a 7, meaning that he can go up to a 20 power minion then and not be overwhelmed with your Bounder. All right, so then moving right along into our conditions, we just have 1. And in an elf deck, don't leave home without the Shadow Between. Again, it's great for healing. Usually you're going to be looking to target Legolas with that, so you get your extra exertions. But, in a pinch, you can heal any elf. Then into our events. And obviously our event package is very robust given that we are running a Galadriel Lady Redeemed / Círdan deck. So you're going to be seeing tons of events that are primarily going to be used to pitch to the discard pile with Galadriel. But we want to play events that can be useful to us if possible. So first of those that's really cool in this deck, here it comes, the quad double shot. Again, just a beautiful Fellowship staple. So awesome to see the playset of that in foil. Don't leave home without it. Again, it just cycles for 0 and adds 1 to the Fellowship archery total. And of course, can be pitched to Galadriel if you need to. Then the next thing that's definitely more situational, of course, is our Sauron hate card, where we can exert to discard a minion, which is just absurdly ridiculous when you can just exert and just kill a massive troll or something like that. So we do have 3 of those. And of course, if you're not playing against Sauron, those are fodder for Galadriel. Same thing here, a little more broad because this is a hate card on any type of orc. So again, if you're playing any type of orc, these can be used to hate them out of the hand, but also then pitch to Galadriel. So we got full 3 of those. So 4 double shot, 3 stand, 3 curse. So we're already up there at 10 events and we're still going. And then we've got our last 2, which is a couple copies of Defiance, just a nice basic pump. Featuring Arwen on there, which is cool because we have that Arwen flavor going on here. And last but not least, we've got 1 copy of Paths in here. Always nice to have 1 surprise path, especially in an archery wounding deck, to get your Ringbearer by, even at Site 9. So yeah, that is the full deck. This is 31 cards, so it's slightly leaner than what you'll usually see, but a very nice lean deck, cycles very well, and really puts the pressure on the opponent in the archery phase. So now I'm moving over to our shadow side, which is one of my favorites, the Morcs. So Morcs, if you don't know, stands for Morgul Orcs, and basically it's the Ring Wraith or Wraith Cultured Orcs is the centerpiece of the deck. So usually when you're seeing Wraiths, you're seeing Nazgul, but this deck is actually, Nazgul are the support of this. They're not the main minions that you're looking to play. So you're looking always to have 1 Nazgul down, that being said, because it triggers the abilities on all of your Morcs, but the Morcs is where it's at for this deck. So for those of you who don't already know this deck type, the Morgul Brute is really going to be, your first centerpiece. So how these guys work is they're just small minions that are really easy to throw down and cycle. And you'll see this shadow side is just almost entirely small minions. So you've got the Morgul Brute, and this guy says when you play him, you may spot a Nazgul to add a burden. So that's why I say you got to have a Nazgul down. But if you do, you just get to add a burden every time you play one of these. And of course, the Free People's player may wound the Ringbearer to prevent this, but they won't be able to keep exercising that option too long because they're just going to get way too many wounds on the Ringbearer. So basically, it's going to start adding up burdens. And then even if there's nothing else useful with burdens, you can even remove them to turn this guy higher power, which the threat of doing that is actually a lot better than you might think in terms of being able to overwhelm people that you might not be able to otherwise. So you've got the Morgul Brute. And then you've got his brother, who's very similar here, the Morgul Destroyer. This is actually an uncommon. The Brute is rare. This is uncommon, but this is one of the hardest uncommons to find in the movie block is the Morgul Destroyer. And when you play him, you get to spot a Nazgul to add 2 threats. So it's the same sort of mechanic as the other one, except, of course, you're adding 2 threats, and you still only need to remove 1 to get the strength +3. So just a very nice, you just keep threatening, pun intended, keep threatening with threats by keep playing this guy over and over. So those 2 are definitely going to be the centerpiece of your deck is you keep hitting them with burdens, keep hitting them with threats, and just keep recurring these guys. And you'll see there are some ways in this deck to recur them. And then last but not least, we just have our tiny Swarm Man, the 9 power, 1 deploy. 1 Twilight, sorry, not deploy, wrong game. Morgul Whelps, and I say 9 power because if you can spot even 1 wound on the Ringbearer, you get strength +6. So that's just an absurd bonus. You just triple your strength when you see that any wound on the Ringbearer, and I can assure you when you play this, you will have a wound on the Ringbearer. And basically just keep up the swarm tactics with that. Then we do have a couple. First, one of the ways we can recur our minions is the Morgul Squealer. As you can see here, discard this minion to play a Wraith minion from your discard pile. So that can be used to get back more of the Brutes and Destroyers. And then also, if your opponent goes up highly on Companions up to 6, you can actually play 2 minions from your draw deck for -1. The really cool synergy here is you can pull an Enquea out of your deck, and if you spot 6 Companions, of course, that Enquea is live. So that's a really nice thing to pull with that Morgul Squealer. So 2 copies of that. Now we're getting into our Nazgul, and again, a very light Nazgul package. I want to say 2, 4, 6, 8. Only 8 Nazgul total in this deck. Again, it's only a 31 card deck though, so it's pretty lean. So if you're playing a little bigger, you have to add a couple more Nazgul. But there's 2 guys that are really going to be critical for us. One is Ulaire Cantea, Faster Than the Winds. Most people know Cantea. His job, of course, is to add threats, but then also discard possessions. So very relevant, getting rid of people's possessions so that you can win those skirmishes, but also relevant to keep the threats on. And you're already threatening, as I said, with a lot of threats from the Destroyer. So 2 copies of the Cantea. And then this guy I think is the best in the deck, Lemenya, the Assailing Minion. This is a very not well-known Nazgul, and that's because it's really only for the Morc deck. And if you read it, it just gets increasing bonuses based on spotting minions. And I can tell you, it counts itself, so it doesn't say other minion, or it should say, let me clarify. It does say other minion in the first ability, the second ability does not, and the third ability does not. So kind of weird templating there, but it's strength +1 for each other minion you can spot, so that's just a nice strength bonus. Then, while you can spot 3 Wraith, it gets Fierce. While you can spot 4 Wraith, it gets damage +1. So again, including itself. But let's just give you an example. Let's say you spot a Destroyer, a Brute, and a Whelp. And you're spotting these 3 guys. So you got these 3 guys down. This guy's your 4th. So you are now spotting 4 Wraith minions. So this guy is now damage +1. He's now Fierce. And he is also strength +1 for each other minion. So now you've suddenly got a 12 power Fierce, damage +1, and it only costs 4. So that is just a fantastic synergy when you get some crappy Morcs down. This thing is your beastly minion to hit them with. So we do have 2 copies of that. I wouldn't fault you for going up to 3 though. That's definitely, I think, the key power minion in the deck here. The other last couple are just placeholder minions as far as I'm concerned. You've got 2 copies of Atsea, Thrall of the One. You can discard him to get some extra Twilight during the regroup phase, but to me, again, not amazing, but he's a 4 cost, so we're just trying to get some cheap Nazgul down. And then same thing here, very non-critical. You can make the sight number of each minion -1, and your sight number is already only a 3 anyway. But again, just it's a different minion, a different Wraith minion, and it costs 4. That's really what this guy's for, 1 copy. And then I mentioned before, we do have our 1 copy of Enquea. In particular, you can search that up if you need to with a Squealer. But also, it's always good to just have 1 Enquea. So that's that. And then, actually got 3 more minions, because like I said, this deck is mostly just all minions. We do have a couple Bill Fernies. Work really great with the swarming guys, because you never know when you can throw a Bill Ferny on here. Again, you guys probably know your opponent cannot assign Bill Ferny to a skirmish, so you always get to assign him. Meaning, when you're threatening with Brutes and Destroyers, that could potentially get very big with the +3s. And then I can also throw on a Bill Ferny wherever he might want to go. You can really surprise people with an overwhelm. So we got 2 copies of Bill Ferny. And then lastly, as I said, you're going to just keep getting wounds on the Ringbearer. And what better to go with that theme than Golem, Dark as Darkness, because exert Golem twice to exert the Ringbearer, just as a native shadow ability. And then he has all of his burden removal. And even if he doesn't get touched, he can exert twice to wound the Ringbearer in the regroup phase. So you can actually just keep really, really threatening the Ringbearer with wounds with Gollum Dark as Darkness. And of course, no surprise to anyone, we're going to be running the full play set of Captured by the Ring. So, hardest to get common card in Movie Block. This is like a $80 common card. But basically, this key in this deck also, the threats are very relevant because you have so much that's adding threats between Cantea and the Destroyer. So the threats that would be added by Captured by the Ring are very relevant. And then recurring the Golem to keep pressuring wounds on the Ringbearer is very relevant also. And the final card in the deck here is 2 copies of Flung into the Fray. So you probably saw literally every card in this deck is a minion, and then you can basically count Captured by the Ring as minions. So literally every card in this deck is a minion except for these 2 Flung into the Fray. And again, all this is doing is helping you recur minions. So you want to use this every time you can, because in the regroup phase, you can stack 1 minion on it. It can't hold multiple, it can only hold 1. But you can stack a minion, and in particular, you're going to wanting to be stacking the Brutes and the Destroyers, because when you unstack and play them again, you get to re-trigger the when you play ability and get more threats, more wounds, more threats or more burdens. And then the key thing here is when you play a minion, you may exert a companion. Now, read that carefully. That does not say an unbound companion. That does not say except the Ringbearer. You can actually exert the Ringbearer off of that. So that is what's brutal, is you can actually put a ton of pressure on the Ringbearer by trying to exert him. But of course, too, feel free to go after other key companions. But that's an important thing to know, because most cards like that are not templated to be able to go after the Ringbearer. So that is the Morcs. And again, 31 cards, very cheap, very cyclable deck. So that's going to be teamed up well with this Archery deck that you see, because we're just going to really play through the deck quite quickly. And last but not least, we have our Sitepath. So just going to walk you through this really quick. We've got the Rohirrim Road. Absolutely fantastic, guys, to choke your opponent with this. Just exert up Galadriel a couple times, and then all your opponent's conditions and possessions cost +4. It's just sick. Just a sick play. Then you've got the Rohirrim Camp. That's just a shadow card that makes minions not roaming. You've got the Hall of Kings to draw cards. Again, this deck cycles very well. Don't know how much you're going to need that, but you got it if you need it. The Pelennor Fields, that again, this is the one that typically exert a minion and remove a burden to make a free people's player discard one of his conditions. So again, that is something useful you can do with burdens. Then wounds cannot be prevented or healed. Burdens cannot be removed. Again, just kind of a card just to stop your opponent from doing any extracurricular healing or burden removal. Even stops like Sam, Son of Hamfast at this site, for example. Then the 7th Circle of Minas Tirith. Again, no surprise here probably for you guys that this is the Elven companion one, so that if you move past it in the regroup, you heal all your elves. Then the Pelennor Grassland. Exert to add 1. Nice for Swarm. Morgulduin. No surprise there, because that's what lets us remove 2 threats to play a Nazgul from our discard pile, 4-2. So that can just get vicious. So if you have, 4-6 threats on there, don't be worried about just like unloading the discard pile on your opponent. Do that. And then lastly, this is the one that's the add 3 threats, Dagorlad. Pretty staple of most decks, but this deck does do threats as well. So that is our Sitepath. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I tried to keep the pace going pretty quickly, but still, cover all of the relevant interactions for you. Hopefully you enjoy the deck text, enjoy the movie block, and hopefully everyone, regardless, enjoys the foils. So stay tuned. Don't know how much farther we're going to go into this video. Like I said, we're already into the top 8, but there's was a lot of repetition of elves and men in the top 8. So I'm probably going to go a little deeper into the top 16 just to give you some other variety of decks. But probably have 3 or 4 more videos in this series. We'll see if we do more now or if I come back to this later. But this is, as I said, my favorite format. and I've got a whole gauntlet of foil decks for this. So glad that you guys are enjoying it, and stay tuned for more videos.